In the world of science, music and dance have something of an image problem. If you think about this, what's the use of music and what's the use of dance? Well, it's just merely to entertain us, surely. What possible other benefits could they have? Well, as it turns out, music and dance, and particularly music, has a really powerful and profound effect upon the brain and the mind. And we can use that in all sorts of treatment circumstances. And we're particularly interested in Parkinson's disease. But before we get onto that, let's just look a little bit at music itself. So, music has been found to have a powerful effect upon motor and reasoning skills. It can aid visual attention. It can help us learn a second language. It can be used to reduce pain. So it can act as an analgesic for those people who are chronic sufferers. It can also lower blood pressure. And as well, perhaps amazingly, if we listen to music that we really like and have a strong emotional attachment to, it can be found to boost our immune systems. So far from music and dance just simply being entertainment, it can have all sorts of positive effects upon our bodies and our minds. These multiple effects that have been found with respect to music are corroborated with brain imaging studies. So when we listen to a piece of music, again that we particularly have a strong emotional attachment to, we can find areas associated with musical structure are activated. That's the frontal cortex. That's for processing syntax. We've also got areas associated with reward, particularly for prediction. If you think about when you listen to a piece of music, what the brain is constantly doing is looking for patterns. And when those patterns are fulfilled, we have a sense of reward. And hormones associated with reward, oxytocin and dopamine, are released. Incidentally, we also get those same chemicals released when we have sex and eat chocolate. We've got the amygdala, which is activated, and that's strongly associated with our emotional responses. We also have the hippocampus, so that stores memories for music, and we have an area at the back of the brain called the cerebellum, that's actually Latin for little brain, that is activated whenever we tap our foot or tap our finger or dance to music. And then perhaps most importantly, we have a complex of neurons in the midbrain called the basal ganglia, which are strongly activated when we listen to something with a rhythmical component and a beat. Now, all music has rhythm and beats, and so the basal ganglia are really very, very important for the processing of music. I'll return to the basal ganglia later because they play an important part in our story, because the basal ganglia are not only just associated with music processing, but also with automatic movements. And by automatic movements, I'm referring to movements that we make without actually thinking about it, such as walking or reaching for a glass on the table. We just see the glass and our hand goes forward. We want to change our position from here to there, and we just walk. We don't think, I need to lift my left leg and my right leg and so on and so forth. So automatic movements, and the basal ganglia are really strongly involved in that. So this multiple activation of the brain when we listen to music has meant that researchers have begun to apply music for the therapy of all sorts of neurological problems, and they include traumatic brain injury, multiple sclerosis, cerebral palsy, autism, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's disease. Alzheimer's is the most frequent form, most common form of dementia. Second is Parkinson's. And we're particularly interested in Parkinson's disease. It affects over 1 million people in North America currently. And so it has a significant effect on the health services which are provided. It's a neurodegenerative disease. Its life expectancy after diagnosis is usually about 10 years, and it starts with very minor symptoms, which can be both physical and cognitive, and by the end of the 10-year period, the physical symptoms can mean that the person is completely debilitated and in a wheelchair. The sorts of physical symptoms that you get with Parkinson's, if you're not aware of it, are things like slowness of movement, sometimes referred to as bradykinesia. You'll also see people with Parkinson's very often have a tremor. They can have a stiffness of movement as well. And one other particular symptom, which is a major problem because of the health implications and the healthcare implications of it, are trips and falls. So there's a lot of postural instability with Parkinson's disease. Now, starting in 2014, we had the opportunity to form a partnership at McMaster University with Hamilton City Ballet. Hamilton City Ballet run a really inspiring program for people with Parkinson's disease. It's called Dance for Parkinsons. And every 2 weeks, students, or people with Parkinson's, come into the class and learn particular types of ballet movements and positions, and alongside music. So they're putting this movement together with music. And we thought, wouldn't it be great if we could make an application that people use in their own homes that is based on the choreography and music from the class, so they can have exposure to music and dance on a daily basis rather than just every 2 weeks, which is the current situation. Now that's the idea, but of course turning the idea into a reality takes a considerable amount of work. For a start, humans are very, very sensitive to other human movement. And therefore, if you make an application which has artificial human movements within them, we're going to notice that straight away. So I'm just going to show a video which shows you how we take biological human movement data from a motion capture laboratory and turn it into a dance application. Once you have that data and you've rendered it into a virtual avatar, you want to put it into some sort of hardware framework. And the hardware framework that we use is one that uses a Kinect camera. The Kinect is Microsoft's gaming camera, and basically it's a motion sensing camera. So I'm sure many of you will have heard of things like Dance Revolution, which uses the Kinect camera to have a sort of dance interactive game and so on and so forth. The great thing about the Kinect camera is that you can create a system which has a feedback loop. In other words, the user, depending on their abilities, can interact with the dance avatar. One of the interesting things about Parkinson's, and one of the big challenges for making an application for people with Parkinson's, is that, as I mentioned earlier, the difference in the mobility of people with Parkinson's is absolutely huge. You've got people who you can hardly tell have the disease, right through to people who are in wheelchairs. So a one-size solution fits all isn't going to work with Parkinson's. You've got to have something which is going to be adaptable. And the great thing about the Kinect is that it can watch the user, see what movements they are capable of, and modify in real time those movements of the avatar. So it's as if you have a personalized dance instructor in your own living room. So that's just the basic outline of it. But one of the other things, again, which I mentioned previously, is that Parkinson's isn't just a physical problem. It's also a cognitive and emotional problem as well. So very often people who have Parkinson's suffer from depression and are demotivated. So it's very important if you're making a system for people with Parkinson's to make it attractive to use, to make it motivational. So over on the left-hand side, the screen, there's a progress bar, which is using the information, the movement information being collected by the camera, and turning that into scores. At the end of each dance, we can take that information and we can tell people how well they did. And if they are not very good, we can slightly skew the results to encourage them. So people can win scores and points. And we all know what points mean, don't we? Points mean prizes, exactly. So people can have their own virtual trophy cabinet where they can collect things. This is all part of making a human, usable and attractive application. Very important in the case of Parkinson's, where people are demotivated. As I mentioned, one of the commonest forms of injury in Parkinson's is trips and falls. So the system is capable of watching the user, and if they fall over, they fall off their chair, it will spot that, and it will pause the game and ask them whether they need help. Using a voice recognition software, if they answer yes to that question, an emergency text message is sent to their primary caregiver. So it's a way of building an application which has safety and motivation and is interactive into a single package. Now, the other thing about Parkinson's is that most people with Parkinson's are elderly. They're not a generation which is used to interactive gaming. That will obviously change as people progress through the generations, but currently they're not a generation that is used to playing video games. So we wanted to create a menu system which was very intuitive and easy to use and friendly. So this is just the opening title sequence of the application, and everything is going to be accessed through this magic music box. You'll see the person down in the right-hand corner, and every time they move their hand, they're selecting different dancers. And once the user has found the dance they want, a simple swipe downwards allows us to fly into the music box, and inside the music box is the dance studio. So it's trying to create a friendly, intuitive system that is motivational to use. Now, of course, it's fun to make an application which is nice for people to use and that they can use on a daily basis in the comfort of their own homes. And that was job number one done. But the real intention of this was not just to create an application for people to use, but also to create a research tool. We've known for 20, 25 years that music and dance are beneficial for people with Parkinson's, but a lot of that information is anecdotal, individual case studies, or short-term studies. What this technology allows us to do is to put a research tool into people's homes where we can collect the movement data over a 6-month, over a 12-month period. Then we can examine the movements on a day-by-day basis of people to see whether the intervention of music and dance is affecting the normal trajectory of the disease. We can also couple that with imaging studies, such as MRI, that's magnetic resonance imaging, looking at brain iron content, myelin integrity, that's the fatty coating on the outside of nerve cells, cortical thinning measurements, functional connectivity, the way different parts of the brain speak to each other, and also microvascular perfusion. That's something which relates to the blood flow rates which change in people with Parkinson's disease. So all of these things can be combined, and they're harnessing the power of this application stroke research tool. So, I guess we have to finish by asking the question, why music and dance? What effect are they having? And there are really principally two effects that music and dance are having. The first we can call rhythmic auditory stimulus. Music and dance are this rhythmic auditory stimulus. Now, one of the things that people with Parkinson's have a problem with very often is initiating movements. And this is why trips and falls very often happen. And they're walking along, and all of a sudden the leg will freeze. The top part of the body wants to carry on moving forward. The leg will freeze, the momentum carries them forward, and over they go. Interestingly, music, the metrical structure of music and dance, is a very good way of initiating movements. So if people with Parkinson's are given rhythmic auditory stimulus in the form of music with a regular pulse that matches the natural rhythm of their walking, it stabilizes their walking and means that they have far fewer trips and falls as a consequence. So that's one aspect of why music and dance are beneficial. But that's, in a sense, a short-term effect of music. The other, which is potentially much, much more exciting, relates to something called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is, in a sense, a relatively new science. And it's founded on the concept that the brain can do two remarkable things. The first thing that it can do is it can actually generate new neurons. So if you study a particular skill that requires new neurons, they can actually be generated. And the second is that you can co-opt existing redundant neurons to do new tasks. Now, remember how I said at the beginning of the talk that in Parkinson's, the basal ganglia, the neurons in the basal ganglia, neurons called dopaminergic neurons, these are dopamine-releasing neurons, are negatively affected. Well, there's part of the basal ganglia called the substantia nigra. This has a very strong concentration of dopaminergic neurons in it, and it's particularly these neurons which are damaged in Parkinson's disease. What music and dance can do is to help train people to bypass the basal ganglia and the substantia nigra and co-opt different neurons. So in other words, it can't cure the disease, but it can allow the brain to heal itself through this process of plasticity. And it's that area which is particularly rewarding with respect to music and dance. Thank you very much.